He is a successful business person, an entrepreneur, an innovator, and especially a philanthropist. So help us enjoy and celebrate Brett by watching his tribute video, and then we will welcome Daryl Rudachuk from Prairie Merchant to the stage to present Brett with his award.
There's, again, no topic off limits. Ask what you want. I don't care.
You know what? I'm just going to clap in front of your face to swap cameras. Wow!
He's got a strong personality and does enjoy stirring the pot.
What I'd often say is that I use Instagram for family and friends, and I use Twitter for fighting.
People who've dealt with him generally know that, he's honest.
My goal is to provoke thought, to encourage people to think differently about what they had thought about. I want Canada to be the best it can be.
Anyone that says anything bad about Brett or doesn't like him does not know him. Because anyone that does know him knows how special he is.
Well, I was born in the Battlefords in 1957, and I often say that I'm a capitalist with a heart because my mother was a social worker and my dad sold used cars.
He was the smart kid, small with glasses, so probably got picked on. I think Brett really came into his own when he got to university.
It was almost a flip of a coin when I finished high school in terms of whether I studied engineering or commerce. Ultimately, a commerce degree, MBA call it, following the engineering degree was a logical sequence. I barely graduated engineering, so getting into the MBA program took some negotiating and discussion. It was the original Dragon's Den pitch. They asked me for my graduating average. I kind of muttered, 59.5, pretty close to 60. I was pretty proud of that. They basically refused to give me the application form. I phoned up to the dean of the business school. He agreed to let me in on a probationary basis.
I think saw a need for a new approach.
I struggled over time with the fact that Calgary wasn't focused on oil and gas. Broke loose to go back and start an investment bank. And that was really the fun and exciting story, was getting First Energy off the ground.
So he and Murray Edwards, Jim Davidson, Rick Raffin, I believe, were the 4 founding partners.
Virtually every investment bank in Canada was Toronto-based, so it was odd that some guys in Calgary thought they could run an investment bank and build it from scratch.
When they started, most people kind of rolled their eyes, but very quickly they did very well financially.
To be blunt, we were lucky and we nailed it.
Brett kind of took charge of the philanthropic drive behind First Energy. They had a policy of donating 10% of net earnings to charities in the year, which I think no other company would do something quite like that.
I really do enjoy the opportunity to engage with community through charity work. One of the highlights of my own living career was traveling to Afghanistan. I've done 10 trips to Mexico. I kind of like when I can do a little more. I retired the summer that I turned 50. That fall, I happened to get an email that said, "We'd like you to be the next Dragon." They asked me to explain why they should choose me. In an email, I said it takes a combination of balls, brains, and a wallet to do deals, and you appear to be somewhat short of all 3 on the show at this time. What I didn't think about was that they would forward that email to all the Dragons. I went on that show for the purpose of doing deals. I'm an investment banker.
He still gets stopped on the street by people and they say, "You were my favorite Dragon."
I realized that I was losing. I was winning in the office, but losing at home. My ex-wife and I split. I made the decision to be home 50% of the time, which was way up from 5% for a better relationship with all of my kids. up. I didn't balance family and work, or even my own health, properly. My health journeys included 5 rounds of cancer, 5 rounds of radiation, 5 rounds of killing cancer. Unfortunately, radiation damage to my body has been a setback. While I was in Mexico, Cabo San Lucas, I had a stroke. I woke up in the hospital and there's Caitlin. What the hell?
What he does for all of us, he would be there in a second, so it was a no-brainer to hop on a plane and go to him and make sure he was okay.
She arranges for a nurse, all Caitlin driven.
There was definitely a language barrier being in Mexico, so trying to translate, get a translator, get the doctors that were needed, and figure out how to get a plane to get us home.
I got dragged home, and I spent almost 5 weeks in the hospital. I couldn't move my arm, my leg, my foot, my hand. You lose those things, and you wonder, when's this coming back? So a stroke was quite a learning experience for me.
Or if Brett believes in you and trusts you, then that's good enough. Doesn't need a team of lawyers behind him to paper things and all of that.
When it comes to gifts, him letting us use his properties, Brett is very generous, almost to a fault, not just with what he can give us through any health issues, he's always there. He's created this team where we're actually all best friends. Not just while we're at the office, when we get home, we have group chats and are texting each other.
As team building goes, it's an extraordinary experience. You know, whether it's my garden party or Christmas concert, it's always about engagement.
As Brett says, every day's a work day, every day is a vacation. And I think that's a perfect mentality for anyone to have when they get to Brett's success level.
You know, in terms of contribution, I'd be proud to be known as
Grandpa Brett.
That's really what I would call my legacy.
Do you have any additional questions? Yeah.
Something I don't have to choke up on.
Good evening, I'm Daryl Rudachuk.
Woo!
Jessica Cohen, who helped organize tonight's event, asked that I include in my introduction how and when I met Brett, and then to tell everybody a few things about him that might be true. So, as for the how and when, I first met Brett in August 1976 in dorm room number 218 at the University of Saskatchewan residence, where, as Brett likes to describe, he and I were randomly assigned roommates. Over the past half century, yikes, I have known Brett as a roommate, as a groomsman, as a business colleague, and as a friend. And so I know Brett about as well as anyone. And here are a few things that I can tell you. First, in the fierce competition for Brett's time and attention, there is a clear winner, and that is family. And the fact that his 2 daughters are with us tonight at our table, I think probably means as much, maybe more to him than the award. But coming in a close second is community. And the one group in our community that has always been a core interest of Brett's and a focus of his support is business and entrepreneurship. Now, it's been mentioned a few times already tonight that Brett was a dragon on Dragon's Den. And as I was being interviewed for the video that we watched, the interviewer asked me, or told me, that in conducting his research, he became aware that Brett was widely considered to be Canada's favorite dragon. And he asked me why I thought that was. And I said to him, I had a very simple one-word answer, and that was empathy. Brett himself is a very successful entrepreneur, and when he hears somebody making a business pitch, he's got the ability to imagine himself in their place and has a genuine empathy for them. And I think it's that humanity that Brett brought to the show that resonates with people. So while the other dragons would ask financial questions about revenue growth rates and EBITDA multiples or anything else you could find on a level 1 CFA exam, Brett really only had one fundamental question, and that is, why is this business important to you? And from that answer, Brett could tell if the person had the passion. Brett has one maxim in business, and that is, while you can have passion and fail, without it you cannot succeed. And so while the other dragons may have dismissed someone based on a lack of faith in the business plan, Brett would often invest regardless, as long as he had faith in the person. So with that as a little bit of an insight into what I think drives Brett, I'm proud as a friend to have him join us on stage, join me, and accept the award from all of you. Thank you.
I see the master agenda here says we've got till 10 o'clock. So I will try and use that hour and 10 minutes wisely. It's an emotional moment to be with so many people that I've worked with over the last 30 or 40 years. There's so many people that are long-standing friends, competitors, partners. It's a treat to see the crowd that's here. Now I have my phone handy because I want to see how Trump's doing, but other than that, and by the way, it's not often that you end up in a room where there isn't a single person who would vote for Trudeau. Just saying. I know who you are. Now, as was shared, I grew up in the Battlefords. By the way, I kind of wish Susan and Mike had left their notes, because I'm working a fair bit from memory. And of course, I'm on drugs, so my memory's a little bit edgy at times. And by the way, Susan used to live next door to me, 9 iron away. And Mike Broadfoot, do you remember the name? Where's Mike? Wave to me. Do you know the name Chris Helland? No way. He's here? Holy shit. Anyway, old, long-standing friendship. I actually traveled to Switzerland to watch him play hockey, and I used to watch Claire Drake working on you. I didn't know you were on the ice, Mike, but now I do. So here we are. Anyway, hi, Chris. Grew up in North Battleford. I was a little small for my age. I ended up skipping a grade when I was younger, so I was small for my age and got done high school when I was 16. I remember my first day of engineering school looking around, and there was guys whose hairs hadn't been cut, teeth hadn't been brushed, and the jeans were torn. This was long before torn jeans were normal. The shirts hadn't been washed. These were geeks. I fit in for the first time in my life. It was a real treat. By the way, I was in my second year of engineering, chatting with someone at Louise Pop, Place Real, and yeah, anyone from Saskatchewan would know what that is. And I'm chatting with a guy who had been first year engineering in Toronto, and he'd moved to Calgary, or he'd moved to Saskatoon to do engineering. And I asked the question, how do you draw the boundaries for the universities in Toronto? And he looked at me and said, boundaries? And I said, well, so you know which school to go to. And it was then that it was just dawning on me that you actually apply. Economically and geographically, I had no choice. Saskatoon was where I had to be. I can tell you that virtually every graduate at the University of Saskatchewan, whether it was engineering, law, or accounting, ended up in Calgary. I will proudly tell you that Mr. Brudachuk was president of the Voyageur Place Residents Association, where I might have been president of the Engineering Society. And we started a business together called Brett and Darrell Enterprises, B&D Enterprises. And our first business was renting a bus to take students from residence downtown and then bring them back. We made $200 in one night. Minimum wage was $1.85 at that time. So it was a great start to drinking. Sorry, to enjoying the University of Saskatchewan. We had a lot of fun together. The other story that I'll share, and this was sort of how the world of entrepreneurship began in my life. I still remember when I was appointed to be a member at large, MAL, and I were the people that represented the various colleges. And my first night as an MAL, sitting across from me in this big horseshoe-shaped room, was a guy named Murray Edwards. The second night that we had students meetings, we sat side by side, and I can proudly tell you by the third meeting, we ran the campus. He was unbelievable in terms of inspiring the motivation to think about how can we do things bigger and better as a business. And of course, as an engineer, I had no knowledge of accounting at that time, but he inspired me. We worked closely together and ultimately have continued to, we still own a couple things together. So I still treat Murray as one of the ultimate entrepreneurs. So I finished in Saskatoon, came to Calgary, and as I shared in the video, I was trying to get into the University of Calgary, and they wouldn't, because I hadn't written my GMAT, I hadn't done 5 years work experience, and my graduating average was 59.5. So I wasn't even close to getting in. But Mike Maher was the dean of the business school in Calgary at that time, and I used a 25-cent coin. Some of the younger people here may not realize that there was phones that used coins at one time. But I phoned upstairs to Mike Maher's office and asked if I could meet with him. And his assistant said, "I'll give you 5 minutes." And that's why I jokingly referred to it as the original Dragon's Den pitch. I had to go up and explain to Mike that I wanted in. And he let me in on a probationary basis. I had to get a minimum GMAT, I had to have a minimum grade point average in terms of school, and number 3, stay out of student politics, because he knew that was a bit of a distraction for me. Anyway, I ended up being president of the MBA Society. That was a separate issue. I had to get his permission to do that. But anyway, so Mike let me in, and it turned into an extraordinary experience. The reason I'm emphasizing that is if we're here to talk about learning, if we're here to inspire the next generation, I can tell you that 2 of the people who were professors for me are in this room. How many of you know a guy named Mike Timms? Come on. Mike taught a course called New Venture Finance. It should have been called How to Learn Investment Banking So Someday You Can Compete With Me. Because that's what I did. And it was kind of fun. We stole 3 of his. Anyway, Mike ended up being an inspiration to me. And again, this class was called New Venture Finance, but it should have been called Introduction to Investment Banking. And I fell in love with what I was learning, seeing, and hearing. The other was a guy named Dr. Bob Schultz. And wherever you are, Dr. Bob, standing in the back. So he taught a course in how to compete in the world of business, and part of it was using models and building forecasts and whatnot. And so that ended up being a pivotal moment for me in terms of understanding how to take my knowledge of math, science, engineering, and apply it to the world of business. So I still remember that between Michael Timms and Dr. Bob Schultz, 2 of the pivotal reasons that the University of Calgary ultimately let me in to their program. So without that business degree, I wouldn't be standing here. But more importantly, without that business degree, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do so many things. Now, those who've worked with me know that I've made a lot of mistakes. As I've shared, I had a preoccupation with the world of business. My priorities were size of my wallet, size of my office, size of my car, size of our bottom line at the business, size of my art collection. I still remember one night trying to bid on a piece of art, and they called me 3 times to get me on the bid. But the phone kept ringing, and then it was answered and hung up. I went up to one of my daughter's bedrooms. I don't know what I said for the first 2 minutes, but the last thing I said was, "What the fuck are you doing telling someone I'm not home?" And she looked at me and said, you never are. That was a pivotal moment in my life in terms of ultimately checking into a place called the Meadows, which was an addiction treatment program, whether it was work addiction, life addiction, lots of issues. But I ended up there a couple months later, and it was pivotal in changing my life. I checked in for a month. I'm proud to say they kicked me out after a week because my instructor, the lead dog on my team, said, Brett, you know what you need to do. And it's as simple as reprioritizing your life. My priorities then became, and I'm very common for most of you, probably similar, maybe it's not articulated the same way, but number one is your health. Mental, physical, emotional, all aspects of who you are. Without your health, and you've heard that I'm running into some challenges, pretty proud of my relationship with Alberta Health. Part of the problem there is that I know too many people in Alberta Health now, but there's a lot going on. Anyway, so number one would be health. Number two, family. Nothing beats family. Number three, friends. Number four, for me, would be education, learning, whether it's reading or podcasts or delivering or participating or whatever, but it's learning. Number five would be your career. How are you paying the bills? And then number six would be community, charity, philanthropy, however you want to describe that. And I can proudly tell you that when my experience is taking friends, staff, family to Mexico to build homes, as much as that was an extraordinary charity experience, it was also probably the greatest team building experience I've ever created in terms of taking 50 or 60 people down at a single time. So the other thing that was powerful about that, when I say that was number six, but it impacted numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. My mental health, my family, my friends, my staff, everything was all part of that. So I'm pretty proud of the fact that with a bit of work, I was able to restructure the way I looked at life. And then in the context of a business pitch for the next generation, I often argue that there are three things that you should study. And I don't care whether you're a nurse, a doctor, a dentist, a dental assistant, an engineer, an electrician, a lawyer, an accountant, a welder, a carpenter. All of these experiences tie in together. And from my perspective, and it was no small part Dr. Bob, but the study of marketing is one of the things that we underestimate as a standalone moment. Marketing should be taught in every program, every program. People ask the question, how many sides are there to a business card? And your instant answer is the obvious 2. And I'll push back and say there's 6. And you want to think about why there's 6 and how you can play with all 6 sides. There's the ultimate marketing tool for each of you, and that's your resume, or however you apply to get in with partners, friends, or business. It doesn't matter. But the study of marketing is your point of differentiation. Number 2 is the study of entrepreneurship. And I still remember in the early days when I was first in the entrepreneurship program, which was what I actually focused on at the University of Calgary. Now, my resume said I had I kind of exaggerated. This was for Michael Tim's purposes. But what I said was I had an MBA in entrepreneurship and finance. Okay, there was no finance, but I used it and got into the investment world. So that's marketing. And I did understand enough about finance. Thank you very much, Mr. Timms. But again, going back to the big picture, the study of entrepreneurship, I get pissed. I get a little annoyed with universities, schools, trade schools, I don't care where it is, who often try and teach a program called small business and entrepreneurship. Do not link those two. Small business is a great way to start a business. There's a lot of things you do in that context. But I'll also tell you that the guy running a $140 billion oil company in Calgary, named Mike B. Edwards, he is an entrepreneur. He's not a refined businessman. He is an entrepreneur through and through and through. And so that's why I ask people to separate the study of business and the study of entrepreneurship. The spirit of entrepreneurship is a huge part of how we created our country. The original entrepreneurs were the hunters, the trappers, the fishermen, the guys who drove trains and pulled horses across our country, the ultimate entrepreneurs. And yet we don't celebrate them in that context. So the study of entrepreneurship, understanding how you can look and treat things differently from an entrepreneurial perspective, not stiff and refined. Did I love the world of entrepreneurship. And I emphasize, by the way, with my partners at First Energy, as much as we were partners, I can also tell you that on Wednesdays when we met, the first half hour was trying to agree on what day it was. We had our differences, but the powerful thing that we did together was we didn't vote to win an argument. We worked until we had collaboration. We were partners. All of us were entrepreneurs. And then number 3 is the study of philanthropy as a business tool. And I emphasize the study of philanthropy as a business tool because it's another key point of differentiation. I can tell you, as Daryl hinted or talked about First Energy, when we first started looking at doing charity work, the first month I should say, went to each of the partners, there's 8 people, a couple of guys, a bunch of guys, girls, whatever, and everyone was allowed to give 10 names. Well, we pulled the list of 8 times 10 should be 80. Well, it was only 60 because everyone had Children's Hospital, breast cancer, and there was a lot of common. And I looked at that and said, guys, what are we doing? This isn't right. This doesn't feel right to be just sending money to charities of our choice. Why don't we try and find the charities of our clients' choice? So we started studying, and remember, 1993, little predating the internet. So we had to make phone calls. We had to ask for information. But we called hundreds of charities in southern Alberta, Calgary in particular. And we started studying, and it was my job, started studying who's on the board. Because we were looking for past, present, and future clients on the board of a charity. Or the spouse, or the parent, or the child. It didn't matter, but we were looking for connections. We also wanted to be connected to community leaders, which is how we started talking to Patricia Moore and Cheryl Moore, and I could just go on, but we started choosing community leaders as part of our connection tool. They weren't businesses that we were going to do business with. After the first year, we had over 100 charities on our gifting list, and we continued to grow. First Energy was the first company probably ever in Canada to do events where we said, we'll pay for the party, you pay for the charity. And we weren't asking. First year we asked for cash. We raised 10 or 12,000 bucks. Not enough. We then switched to asking for checks. And we were raising $250,000 at a time back in the early 1990s because people would write checks for the causes that we were putting forward. And the causes we put forward were always tied to our clients. So again, the study of marketing, the study of entrepreneurship, and the study of philanthropy. And by the way, a quick thank you, I'll wrap with this, a quick and sincere thank you to Junior Achievement, the people who were active on the board. When I was doing my business degree, my summer job was working for Junior Achievement. And what was the job? It was kind of cool. It was an experiment. But I was given a budget to hire 8 people who were then given a budget to then start a business. So we were paying people to be entrepreneurs. And it was a pretty cool experience as it started. So it goes back to attempting, from a marketing, entrepreneurship, and philanthropy point of view, a pretty cool summer job. That's it. Thank you. I appreciate all of you.